Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lode-Holt. In South Carolina, one of our shared Lutheran ministries is a long-term care facility known as Loman Home. About 30 or so years ago, the Loman Home was searching for a name for a way to honor significant volunteers and people who donate regularly. They asked a retired seminary professor for help, and he ended up suggesting the name the Innkeeper Society. You see, in Jesus' story of the Good Samaritan, the Samaritan takes the injured man to an inn, and then needing to continue on his way, he entrusted care of the man to the innkeeper until he could return. That seemed to describe well the mission of Lomenholm, to care for someone on behalf of others. So the Innkeeper Society was born. I have to tell you, I was greatly impressed with that insight the professor offered. He took an almost unnoticed character in the Bible and applied it in a perfect way. I began to hope that one day I might be able to have that same kind of insight. Well, about 15 or so years ago, my oldest child headed off to college. Noticing that at that time we had numerous parents with children off at college, my wife created a support group for their mothers who were feeling the absence of their child. She asked me what to call the group. After I thought about it for a few days, I suggested that we name it the Jochebed group. The Jochebed group? She asked quizzically. Who is Jochebed? I answered, that's the name traditionally given to Moses' mother, who set her child adrift in a little boat in the Nile River and entrusted him to God. Now, I don't know if that rises to the same level as the Innkeeper Society, but I was proud of it. This week we are focusing on often overlooked women in the book of Exodus. The times were certainly patriarchal, with the major events being done by and centering around men. But the interesting thing in Exodus is that those events that God works through these men really only happened because of what God first did through some women. Yesterday we looked at two midwives who refused to kill male babies as they were born. They couldn't kill them after they were born. That would be murder. And so the male babies were allowed to live. That led to the Pharaoh issuing a new rule. The new rule said that all male Hebrew babies from then on were to be cast into the Nile River to drown. At last we come to Jochebed. When Moses was born, she hid him for 3 months to avoid the new law, but eventually she could keep him hidden no longer. So, in an incredible bit of creativity, she did exactly what the law required. She cast the baby Moses into the Nile River. Only she added a basket for him to float in instead of to sink and drown. She followed the law, and there was no law about adding a basket. She then sent her oldest child, her daughter Miriam, to follow the basket and to see what would happen to the baby. Sure enough, the Pharaoh's daughter had gone to the river to bathe. She saw the basket and found the baby. I'm sure she knew the baby was a Hebrew baby, but she likely interpreted this odd event of receiving a baby in a basket in the river as a gift from her gods, and decided to keep the child as her own. Miriam stepped forward and said that she knew a Hebrew mother who had recently had a child and who could nurse the baby for the princess. It was all arranged, and Moses was returned to Jochebed to care for and to nurse. It is highly ironic that Jochebed was getting paid out of the Pharaoh's treasury to take care of Moses, which was the very thing she wanted to do. So often we might find ourselves adrift on the unpredictable currents of life, not knowing what will become of us. In those times, We are called to float in trust that we belong to God and that God watches over us. Even more, in a time of risk and peril for him, Moses' path to the future led through the water, as does ours in baptism. In the waters of our baptisms, we are adopted as God's children and welcomed and cared for as God's own. Adrift on the currents of life, rest easy in your basket. Jochebed knew, and Jochebed trusted that you belong to God. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.